Hey everyone! Today we're going to be talking about empathy and mental health, or at least the relationship it has with society. Now normally this is where I would promote BetterHelp as a good, affordable resource for seeking out mental health care. However, as someone who knows that they sell your information to third-party companies, I wouldn't recommend that. Instead, you can do what I did and use Google, WikiHow, and TikTok to learn about mental health and ways to manage and help yourself and others, which is basically what the overarching aspect of this video is about. But if you genuinely need therapy, you should definitely seek out a professional.
Question everything, question everything, question everything, question everything. Why?
Disclaimer, I am not an expert on these subjects I discuss in these videos. I only share information that I've personally done my research on, or relaying an expert's message. My goal or intention with these videos is to cultivate understanding, awareness, and acknowledge real-life issues that we as humans face. I do hold certain opinions about these subjects, and so bias can play a role in the way information is shared. I would also like to acknowledge that the way we perceive the world individually can be vastly different from one another, and that's good. However, it's also good to look at things from another perspective when learning about reality, otherwise our biased views can become harmful.
Question: what is empathy? Affective empathy refers to the sensations and feelings we get in response to others' emotions. Cognitive empathy, sometimes called perspective taking, refers to our ability to identify and understand other people's emotions. Now, the reason I bring up this natural human phenomenon is that it allows us to take a moment to understand another before assuming we know exactly what they're going through. For example, we tend to use anger as a way to mask our sadness, stress, or grief. So if someone were to come into work grumpy, as I'm sure we could all relate to, yes, it's not the right place, but showing them some empathy and sympathy might allow them for their mood to improve. Although it's not always a guarantee, at least you try to help someone else feel better. Now, people who lack empathy, example, narcissists, psychopaths, sociopaths, etc., don't understand why you want to help others or make them feel good. Because their brains don't allow them to have that kind of emotional capacity, which is why it's my personal theory that they control the country, but I digress. Now, in psychology, a lot of the time both options apply. For example, nature versus nurture. When it comes to empathy in babies after they're born, genetics as well as the child's upbringing and environment play a part in the development of empathy. Failing to show proper examples of empathy or allowing generational trauma to continue through childhood can decrease the chances that child will develop healthy levels of empathy. Development is pivotal in this because it means it can be learned. However, much like learning disabilities in school can hinder comprehension, the brains of those who lack biological aspects and perhaps experiences would have a significantly more difficult time developing empathy. We have to want to. It has to be important to us. Motivation really matters. We're talking about ways to increase empathy since a study from 1979 to 2009 showed a steep decline in empathy and the rise in narcissism. The desire to get better is the very thing that cycles back into the lack of empathy. They don't care about it in the first place, so how can they want to try and develop empathy? It's been over a decade since that study. However, an observation that was drawn was declines in empathy were happening at the same time as the rise in mental health problems, both symptoms of burnout. The trait of burnout that mainly contributes to the lack of empathy is an individual focusing on only what they have to do, and anything that prevents them from doing so is an inconvenience, resulting in apathy. All these different pressures on young people, I think, crowd out their focus on their own self-care and care for others, because they're really focused on just trying to be successful and make it. So if we're all focused on trying to make it through each and every day just because we don't have the means necessary to take care of ourselves, whether it be due to the increasing costs for everything or the lack of support, it's clear why we don't bother helping other people. Which makes good fuel for the argument that without capitalism and money, no one would do anything. However, as mentioned in one of my previous videos, which you can watch by clicking the card right here, we have very basic human needs, and if they aren't being met, we aren't able to reach our full potential. Now, going full circle to the source of who says we need to be successful and who defines that success, lots of people, but more specifically, the government controls the media we consume, which influences the decisions and opinions of society and shapes our reality. It all depends on the messages that kids receive from their parents and in school, and they might internalize that need to succeed and think that it's the only thing that matters, or that's important, unless they're taught to be mindful of others and themselves, to allow room for empathy, which means teaching diversity in the classroom and in the household.
It's time for a mindful moment. We can take a moment to check in with ourselves.
Remember, when you live in a capitalist society, no matter what you do, it's never enough. Why? Because your self-worth is directly linked to your productivity. Under capitalism, you derive value by doing something, not by just being human. That feeling of guilt and not being good enough is going to pop up when you prioritize your well-being over work. Comparing yourself to others and thinking, I should be doing more, or I should be further along, is a symptom of the system that we live in. If you're making the very healthy decision of slowing down and focusing on your mental health during this incredibly traumatic time, capitalism will tell you to feel bad and question your self-worth. Also, folks from a privileged background, me, may face a ton of pressure to achieve because we're trying to live up to our family's expectations. While that can be debilitating in its own right, others from less privileged backgrounds might be driven by immediate economic conditions. So while I may be like, oh, you have no idea about the impossible expectations that my parents put on me, a less privileged person might be like, I feel like I might not be able to survive this moment in history. I'm not trying to invalidate, I'm just providing context here. Don't forget that capitalism and white supremacy are linked because they both rely on exploiting marginalized folks and especially people of color. And if your therapist looks like me, well, you probably have a very handsome therapist, but also as a privileged white therapist, it's easy for me to forget to bring this up with my clients. So unfortunately, you may have to start this conversation if your therapist is ignoring it, and hopefully they know how to support you. Self-care is important. You can push yourself if you decide to, but ask yourself, where's the urge coming from? Are you feeling inspired and excited to work hard, or are you feeling behind and not good enough? There's a big difference. What's your goal? Well-being or productivity? Because we know what the goal of capitalism is.
One of the most heinous lies of our culture is the lie that humans won't do anything of value unless they're forced to. As though if we had the choice of how to spend our time, we would just spend it sitting there, staring all day, eating potato chips and being depressed. Like, bitch, that's how I have to live because of capitalism, because I don't have any energy to do anything of value. Because I have to spend most of my time and energy making money for evil people. This culture is not about productivity at all, because if we were allowed to be productive, we would mine the potential that we have. There are so many smart, talented, hardworking people who have to waste their lives because they're poor. Like, if we were really productive, we would make a world that we want to live in. Human beings are industrious. It's part of our species. Like, humans get depressed when they retire and they find other things to do. You really want to tell me that, like, being forced to do menial, repetitive tasks that we don't give a shit about is the pinnacle of human productivity and human industry? Can you imagine what people would do if they had more time? Like, the big illusion is that the rich, powerful, famous people are there because they're talented, because they're smart, but it's actually the other way around. They get to be talented and smart because they're privileged. That's what gives them the time and the resources and the privilege to learn shit, to invest in themselves. 5-day work week is not about productivity. It's about making sure that we don't have the time or energy to make the lives that we want. Because if we did that, we would change this fucking world.
Hey man, how's it going? Not good, bro. Not good. Oh, damn, dude, I'm sorry. What's going on? The frickin' socialists abolished money, bro. Oh, really? Yeah, so now I gotta starve. Wait, aren't you literally a baker? Why don't you just bake some bread? There's no money, bro. It's not that simple. The supply chains are broken. What do you mean? Why is the farmer gonna give wheat to the mill? There's no money. So that the mill can grind flour. Why is the mill gonna grind flour? There's no money, bro. So that you can bake bread. Oh, and I'm just supposed to make bread without a profit incentive? Why? To feed yourself and others. Am I missing something here? They got to you too. What? So you're a socialist now? What is that, your motto? Feed yourself and others? I mean, that doesn't sound like a bad slogan. Wake up! Wake up, bro. Here, you wanna watch me eat my last meal? Wanna watch me eat my last meal? Tastes like innovation.
To me, it feels like the US economy is a restaurant. You know, it's the only one in town. We've always been told We can't do any better than this, so don't even bother complaining. But it's not a normal restaurant. It's one of those where they keep the lights turned off so you can focus on the taste. And one day, the manager comes in and they're like, there's a fire in the building. We got to get everyone out right now. And in order to usher everyone out, they got to flip the lights on. So suddenly, you're looking around, seeing this place clearly for the first time, and it is filthy. There's rats running around, there's mold on all the food, the building looks structurally unsound, but there's no time for that. We got to get outside. We're waiting on the sidewalk, you know, the fire department comes, we're clapping for them. And then the manager comes back out, and they're like, wow, sorry about that, you guys. That was weird. Anywho, we will comp your meals, or we'll comp part of an appetizer, and you can come on back in. Let's enjoy ourselves. And you go back in, and the lights are off again, and the music's on again, but now you can hear the little pitter-patter of the rat's feet, and you can't really forget what you saw. And you're looking around, and there's still flames happening. And you say to the manager, like, excuse me, I think the fire is still going on. Like, are we going to finish putting that out or what? And the manager just looks at it and is like, huh, yeah. What a shame. But, have you heard? Our special today is cream of crab.
If people are only focusing on their personal success and ignoring their needs and others for the sake of grind culture, that's a one-way ticket to burnout. So, to recap, teaching people to maintain the current late capitalist society by working yourself to the bone, try paying for the exponentially increasing cost of living on top of being told to go to college, which has also increased significantly. Only having time for work, school, study, and no time for relaxing, hobbies, social life, taking care of yourself, and barely sleeping, which decreases performance in all the other areas, to only be told that they're lazy and just need to work more, when they have literally no way of doing that because they're already burnt out, chronically exhausted, mentally ill, and probably working multiple jobs already. It's a common example of the older generations gaslighting millennials and Gen Z, whether it be intentional or not, doesn't matter, because the fact is that things have changed since they were our age. Younger generations can't do the same things that the older ones did and achieve the same results. Not only was the 40-hour work week meant for one person to work and the other to be at home looking after the kids, but today, two parents working full-time can't look after their kids because they're overworked, which is also why the birth rate is declining. The poor can't afford their own needs, let alone the high cost of raising a child. Why are kids so lazy these days? Why aren't they having kids? Why aren't they getting degrees? Why is everyone quitting? These are questions commonly asked by older individuals, and they don't actually care about the answer because they tend to answer it themselves with, they're all just lazy and apathetic. And guess what? They're right. Defining laziness is to equate it to lethargic, inactive, or idle, and apathy to indifference, passivity, or unconcern. So to quickly reiterate what we just went over, being burnt out from an overbearing workload causes you not only to feel more exhausted, lethargic, but also decreases your levels of empathy, so you care less about other people because you don't have the means to look after yourself, let alone other people. So we are lazy and apathetic because we're human beings being forced to ignore our own needs for the sake of keeping the machine going, aka upholding the capitalist standards of productivity. This is obviously not sustainable, and you can see that via people demanding their needs be met upon dropping this toxic system by quitting their jobs. Corporations don't understand why everyone would just up and leave after not being promised their basic needs, being degraded more than underappreciated by customers and managers alike, being told they aren't allowed sufficient time off, all while being asked to come in and work extra hours, most likely due to understaffing. And we all just agree that that's how life should be, working ourselves to death and not even being able to enjoy life. We're all in the same boat here, and the actually rich people in charge of the 100 corporations that produce the vast majority of pollution on the planet are watching the boat sink from their mega yachts, like a nature documentary. Why would they care about changing the system that we're suffering in? They benefit from it, and they won't have to live through the repercussions of their globally devastating actions. Sounds a whole lot like completely lacking empathy, but I'm simply learning and sharing my findings. So what are your thoughts? Let me know down in the comments section below, respectfully of course. But that's all I have for today's video. I should go more into mental health, because I kind of just glazed over that aspect and was focused more on the empathetic aspects and the burnout symptoms, Because that's the thing, is that burnout is honestly the main cause, as far as I'm aware, for the collective mental health issues that we're facing currently, especially with the global pandemic that is currently still going on. It has not ended, folks. But join us next time where we're going to be talking about the ego and prejudice. Fun topic, I know. But I hope you enjoyed this video and this series so far. And if you're new, you can click subscribe by clicking down below. I've also got a playlist of my videos on the side over here. You can check out another video of mine over here. And that's all. So have a fan-friggin-tastic day. And don't forget to question everything.